Hello, hi, a very happy good evening. So this is Krishna Ma'am and we're going to talk about the story of life on earth, and that's biology. So thank you so much for joining my new beginning series. So today we're going to talk about the part of oogenesis, so how the female gamete is made. So in the previous two lectures, so I have been discussing about the process of spermatogenesis and the structure of the human sperm. So I hope you guys remember the process of spermatogenesis very clearly. So after that, I described the structure of the sperm and when the process of spermatogenesis starts, etc. So today we're going to talk about, or today we're going to elaborate about the topic of oogenesis. That is how the female gamete ovum is formed. So remember, ova is plural and ovum is singular. So every month one ovum is released by one of the ovary. So that's what we're going to see today. So that's the topic of oogenesis. So it's a type of gametogenesis, that is how gametes are being formed. So we are here. So we'll be done with gametogenesis soon. So in the next lecture, I'll be talking about the process of menstrual cycle, which happens in primates. Alright, so a quick recap about when spermatogenesis starts, because I'm not talking about spermatogenesis because that's done way far. So we're going to talk about how the structure of the sperm is detailed and when does the process of spermatogenesis actually begin. Alright, so here we go. So if you remember, spermatogenesis begins at the time of puberty. So this begins at the time of puberty. So for spermatogenesis to happen, so you have the hormone called as GnRH, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone, which is secreted by the hypothalamus. So this GnRH, which is the gonadotropin releasing hormone, this acts on the anterior pituitary. So the anterior pituitary is also known as the adenohypophysis. Hi Niveta, hello, a very happy good evening. So thank you so much for joining my lecture. So please do like, share and subscribe. So the anterior pituitary is called as adenohypophysis. So when this GnRH acts on the anterior pituitary gland, so this causes the anterior pituitary gland to secrete what is called as gonadotropins. So we have a pair of gonadotropins, you can say. So one is your LH, the other one is your FSH. So LH is your luteinizing hormone and FSH is your follicle stimulating hormone. Alright, so your LH acts on the Leydig cells inside your testis. So I hope you guys remember what is Leydig cells. So we have 1 to 3 coiled structures, which is called as the seminiferous tubules, right? So this was your seminiferous tubules. The space in between the seminiferous tubules is called the interstitial space. So this interstitial space because of your class schedule. All right, your classes are really very useful, so thank you so much. This is my biggest energy which is driving me to have YouTube classes every alternate day. So I suggest my friends also to watch your classes. Thank you so much. So you have my you have millions of gratitude from my side. So thank you so much. So if I'm able to even touch at least one life and if I'm able to make a difference, that is what I'm looking for. So thank you so much, Nivita. And I'm really sorry for the technical glitch that's happening at the back end. I'm really sorry. So let's continue here. So the Leydig cells, which are interstitial cells, which are present in the space between the seminiferous tubules. So these interstitial cells are also called, so these interstitial cells, which include your Leydig cells, so that is where your LH acts on. So your LH along with the Leydig cells, actually they help in the production of particular or group of hormones called as androgens, and one particular androgen is called as your testosterone. Okay, so now your FSH along with your testosterone, so this actually helps or stimulates the process of spermatogenesis. So if you remember, so this is the hormonal control that we were reading in the previous class. All right. Yeah. So now, how is the structure of the sperm? So we went on to describe the structure of the human sperm. So if you remember, the sperm has 4 parts. So it has a head, it has a middle piece. So not to forget, it also has a neck and then it has a tail. So the entire structure of the sperm is surrounded by what is called as your plasma membrane. Okay, so the head has your nucleus, which is the haploid nucleus, and the head also has a cap-like structure, and this cap-like structure is the acrosomes. Okay, so the middle piece has mitochondria, which gives energy to the sperm to move into the female genital tract. So the tail part of the sperm enhances or enables the motility of the sperm. So this was the structure of the sperm, and if you remember, I also told one point that around 200 to 300 millions of sperms are produced. So many millions of sperms are produced. Why? The answer is because 60% of the sperms are in proper shape. So among the 60%, only 40% are properly vigorous, or they show vigorous motility. So it is not that all the 200 to 300 sperms are in proper shape and size. So it is produced in a large amount just to ensure there is no failure and the sperms can reach the female gamete. So with this we ended the previous lecture. So today we are supposed to talk about the process of oogenesis. Alright. So here we go. So we'll move into the process of oogenesis. So the process of oogenesis is the process of formation of mature female gamete. So the mature male gamete was your sperm. So the mature female gamete is produced by the process called as oogenesis. So this oogenesis is initiated during the embryonic developmental stage. So if you see, spermatogenesis started at the time of puberty. That is after your childhood, that is, you can say onset of your adolescence, right? But the process of oogenesis begins in the embryonal stage itself. So this is the primary difference between spermatogenesis as well as oogenesis. All right. So each fetal ovary, so if you remember when we were talking about the female reproductive system, so we had a pair of ovary. Right, so each fetal ovary, it has a couple of million gamete mother cells. So they have what is called as the gamete mother cells, and here we call them as oogonia. So there it was spermatogonia, the sperm mother cells or the male germ cells inside the seminiferous tubule. So here it is the gamete mother cell that is present inside the fetal ovary. So we are talking at the fetal stage itself. So that is oogonia, right? So no more oogonia is formed or added after birth. So how much of it is present at the time of fetal development, that is the final number. So nothing is getting added or deleted after birth. Okay. So this oogonia, it undergoes cell division. So it tries to undergo meiotic division. But if you remember, meiosis 1 has your prophase, metaphase, anaphase and telophase. But in your meiosis 1, the prophase has 5 substages if you remember, right? So leptotene, zygotene, pachytene, diplotin and diakinesis. But this oogonia, it gets arrested in the prophase 1 of meiosis. It is not able to complete the prophase 1 of meiosis. So it gets arrested at that particular stage. Now it is given a name that is called as primary oocyte. Alright, so each primary oocyte has a layer around itself, that is a layer of granules, so that is granulosa cell. So now this primary oocyte, which is surrounded by the primary granulosa cell, is called as the primary follicle. Alright, so large number of primary follicles, they degenerate from the birth to puberty. Because only at puberty the girl gets the menstrual cycle. Only during the menstrual cycle you have the release of ovum. But this gamete mother cell gets formed at the time of birth, right? So a lot of them begins to degenerate. So at the time of puberty, you have only 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles. You have millions of gamete mother cells at the fetal stage, but when it comes to the puberty, you have only 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles present. Alright, so the primary follicles, it forms a layer of granulosa cells. Right, so though the primary follicle itself is your primary oocyte plus your primary follicle, it follows or it forms another layer of granulosa cells, that is a new thicker layer. So now it forms the secondary follicle. So I hope you're understanding what I'm saying and you're in tune with what I'm saying. So we are talking about the process of oogenesis. So oogenesis talks about the process of formation of mature female gametes. Okay, so oogenesis begins at the fetal stage. at the fetal or the embryonic developmental stage. So what happens? So at this fetal development stage, the fetal ovary, it has a couple of millions of gamete mother cells. So these gamete mother cells are called as oogonia. So no more mother cells, gamete mother cells are added or deleted after birth. Okay. So this oogonia now tries to undergo meiotic division 1. But unfortunately, it gets arrested in the prophase 1 stage itself. So a meiotic 1 has prophase, metaphase, anaphase and telophase. But it gets arrested in the first stage itself. It gets arrested in the prophase 1 itself. Now this arrested stage is called as your primary oocyte. Now this primary oocyte is surrounded by a layer of granulosa cells. It is surrounded by a layer of granulosa cells. Okay, so now this is called as the primary follicle. Okay, so a lot of primary follicles degenerate. So this oogonia is present in the fetal ovary. So at birth, so when the girl child is born, it tries to enter the meiotic division. Alright. So they degenerate, a large number degenerates. So at the time of puberty, if you see, only 80,000 to 60,000 primary follicles remain. Okay. So at puberty, so when it is nearing the stage of puberty, so the primary follicle is nothing but your primary oocyte that is surrounded by a layer of granulosa cell. Now this forms a new granulosa cell or a new thecal layer, and it forms the primary oocyte with the secondary follicle. So a new layer is formed. So you have your phone, you keep on changing the covers, right? So something similar. So the primary oocyte was initially enclosed in the primary follicle. Later it develops into the secondary follicle. Now it will develop into the tertiary follicle. So the tertiary follicle has a fluid-filled cavity that is called as antrum. Okay. Now at the time of puberty, what happens? So this primary, when the girl child reaches the stage of puberty, this primary oocyte, which is surrounded by the tertiary follicle, so this completes the meiotic 1 division. So here it is arrested. So here it is getting completed. So here it is getting arrested. So that completes on the onset of puberty. So when it is undergoing meiotic division 1, so it forms the secondary oocyte surrounded by your tertiary follicle. But if you remember, at the end of meiotic division 1, you should form 2 cells. So one cell is secondary oocyte, the second cell is the tiny polar body. So here the division is unequal. You do not get 2 cells of the same size. So you get one bigger cell and one smaller cell. So after the meiotic division, you have to get 2 haploid cells. So here the haploid cell is secondary oocyte, which is surrounded by the tertiary follicle plus the tiny polar body. Alright. So now what happens? This tertiary follicle gets developed into what is called as Graafian follicles. So now it develops into what is called as the Graafian follicle. So as the Graafian follicle starts to develop, the secondary oocyte forms a layer around itself. So between the secondary oocyte and the Graafian follicles, you have another layer that is called as zona pellucidea. Alright, so when you have maximum LH concentration, the Graafian follicles, the outer layer, it ruptures and it releases your secondary oocyte. So once the Graafian follicle releases, once the Graafian follicle ruptures, it releases your secondary oocyte, which is covered by the zona pellucidia. So when the secondary oocyte is released, surrounded by zona pellucidia, so that is your ovulation. So that is where your gamete is produced. Ma'am, only one meiotic division is done. When will the second meiotic division happen? The second meiotic division will happen when the sperm encounters the egg. Alright. So far, this is what happens. So what happens? So at the time of, hi W, yes, a very happy good evening. So thank you so much for joining our sessions. After a long time, I'm seeing you in my lectures. It's nice to have you. So when will you have mentee? So give me 2 more lectures. I'll be done with the chapter and then we can have the mentee. Alright. Yes. So here what happens at the time of the fetal development. So you have the gamete mother cells, which is oogonia. When the girl child is born, this oogonia undergoes meiotic division 1. But it unfortunately gets arrested in the prophase 1. So it is now called as the primary oocyte. This primary oocyte is surrounded by primary follicle. So from the birth till the puberty, a lot of primary oocytes or primary follicles are degenerated. So at the time of puberty, you have only 60,000 to 80,000. So from millions, you have only 60,000 to 80,000 left. So when the girl child enters the puberty stage, what happens? By the time she enters the puberty stage, this primary oocyte is surrounded by the primary follicle. Right? It was there. Now this primary follicle is covered by the secondary follicle, then by the tertiary follicle. The tertiary follicle has a fluid-filled layer called as the antrum. So now when the girl child attains puberty, so what happens? So this primary oocyte undergoes it completes the meiotic division 1. So here it forms the secondary oocyte plus the tiny polar body. Now this secondary oocyte develops a new layer that is called as the Graafian follicles and also a layer called the zona pellucidia between itself and the Graafian follicles. So slowly this Graafian follicle ruptures to release the secondary oocyte along with the zona pellucidia. So this is the process of ovulation, or this is how the process of oogenesis happens. Alright, okay. Yes, W, I forgot to read your message, so you can type it once again, so I never saw your message, right? So this is how the process of oogenesis happens. So if you see the secondary follicles, then tertiary follicles, if you see the tertiary follicles have fluid-filled cavity, that is antrum. So then the thecal layer, which I said, so it can be differentiated into the internal one and the external one. So the primary oocyte with the tertiary follicle, it completes its first meiotic division. It forms a secondary oocyte plus the tiny polar body. The secondary oocyte retains the cytoplasm of the primary oocyte because it can get a lot of nutrients. So this is an important line. So it's a part of your CBSE as well as your NEET. Okay. The tertiary follicle changes into the mature Graafian follicles. So now slowly the secondary oocyte develops a layer around itself, that is zona pellucidia. Now the Graafian follicle will rupture to give your secondary oocyte. So this process is called as ovulation. And this is the process of your oogenesis. So this is how it happens. If you see the oogonia is 46. And when it is arrested in the first meiotic division, it is still 46. That is, it is still diploid. Only when it completes the meiotic division, the secondary oocyte is haploid. The polar body is haploid. If you see, here only they have changed the ploidy. So till here it is 2n. It is 46 only. So here it is 23. And the second meiotic division, I will tell you where it happens. It happens when it encounters a sperm. Right? So this is the process of oogenesis. If you can see the primary follicle, the secondary follicle, the tertiary follicle, then the Graafian follicles rupture to release the secondary oocyte. So this is how it happens. Alright. So this is the process of your oogenesis. So this is how your oogenesis happens. So we are done with today's concept of oogenesis. So in the next class, I'll be teaching menstrual cycle. So please be there because students always have a confusion in the menstrual cycle. So we'll get all your doubts cleared. So please join me for the next lecture on Friday for menstrual cycle. Alright. So here we go. So if you genuinely like my teaching, so please do like, share and subscribe. So we end our lecture today. So I'll meet you on Friday at 4:30, and we'll be elaborating on menstrual cycle. So until then, so please do like, share, and subscribe. So please start your preparation. So please give your 100% into it. So I'll bring a session about how to prepare for your NEET exam very soon. So stay tuned to know when that session is. So until then, this is me signing off. So take care and bye. Thank you.